So we got shotguns and bombs. The hell are we doing with them?
Playing The Last of Us Part 1 is what we're doing, Joel. That sentence Joel said I think sums up The Last of Us' combat pretty well. Hey stragglers and tourists, my name is TheiPadCat, and in today's video we're gonna discuss The Last of Us Part 2's combat and how the melee system seemed to have been taking a bit of a front seat. But before we get to that, I just want to thank Alex Nadine, a member of the TheiPadCat Discord server, for this video idea. If you yourself want to suggest an idea, or just chat with me or other subscribers of the channel about The Last of Us or other games, join it through the link in the description. I'd also really appreciate it if you followed me on Twitter, since YouTube is pretty bad at notifying people when you upload. Through Twitter, I'll always be able to inform you of new videos and whenever I'm about to stream. That link is also in the description. But enough about that, let's get into this. So, like I mentioned at the start, The Last of Us, even though you could stealth your way through encounters and pretty much rely on melee combat only if you wanted to, had a lot of focus on the shooting and means of killing people that weren't melee. The quote-unquote forced melee wasn't really there unless you played on the highest difficulties. I think the intent was to make gunfights dangerous and risky because the scarcity of ammunition and other resources, but it ended up being, most of the time, going in guns blazing was just a convenient thing to do, not because you had to. In the demo Naughty Dog showed at E3, it seemed like that scarcity and danger to gunfights was really there this time. Of course, it could just have been that way because it's a demo made to look nice, but I have a feeling that it's not. They emphasized a lot in the E3 panel the day after the demo that the AI had gotten a huge upgrade this time around. They will have organized teamwork and strategy to hunt Ellie down. And if that holds true in the main game, I think that original intent behind the melee combat in Part 1 will be there in Part 2. When Ellie got noticed, the player didn't just whip out the shotgun, aka easy mode solve everything with one button press tool. No, it was fluid fighting involving dodging, taking weapons out of the enemy's hands mid-fight, and escaping through thin gaps between shelves. It wasn't just the same 3 punches with either the fists, 2x4s, baseball bats or pipes, or the one-shotting of the machete or the hatchet, or just getting locked into a button-mashing quick-time event. It felt way more realistic, as if there was real danger. Of course, I think The Last of Us Part 2 will also be playable on an easy mode, but I definitely think this game will be more of a challenge than the first one, and the emphasis on melee weapons is definitely telling, I think. I'm not saying that the first one was easy. I can't even remember how many times I died the first time I got to the Grand Hotel basement in Pittsburgh. But what I think this second game will require more of is strategy. Most of the time, if your plan went south, you could just resort to mashing square and punching everyone to death. By the looks of it, Part 2 will feel more like the David boss battle in its combat than that. Moving on, I'd like to talk a bit about how this could fit into the story. I don't think I'll have to explain how pretty much every factory on Earth shut down 25 years ago, except for the ones Fedra have in the quarantine zones, and that there's a shortage of pretty much every consumable item, including ammunition. The Last of Us Part 1 was supposed to have an item starve system for you to really get that apocalyptic desperation feel. It did, but it wasn't really present apart from the higher difficulties. Also, in a world devoid of the sound pollution of modern society, ravaged by monsters with super hearing, don't you think gunfights would be a pretty stupid idea if not used as a last resort? I get that it's a game, and it's supposed to have action in it, but the path Part 2 seems to be taking makes way more sense. Here's an idea I got from all this focus on melee weapons. Maybe the seraphites, which seem to mostly be using melee weapons or bows, ideologically oppose modern firearms or modern technology altogether, like the polar opposite to the Fireflies. Maybe they want a religious state out of like the Middle Ages, like the Fireflies want everything to be the way it was before the outbreak. I might be looking too much into it, but still, In a previous video, I was wondering about their motivations, and that might be one alternative. Maybe different factions will fight differently. That might be an interesting change as well. In the first game, we just had the same enemy types across every faction, except for the infected. I'd imagine if we were to fight the military or some other militarized faction like the Fireflies, that it would be all assault rifles and heavy armor, and not a lot of hammers and bows. That would make sense as well, and it'd present us with variety in gameplay. And it would also make them extremely dangerous if Part 2 really is more melee oriented than the first game. And I feel that's appropriate if we're talking about the military. I mean, they're a faction I'd imagine most survivors who are on their bad side are terrified of, and the focus on melee weapons would definitely make that fear very real. And multiplayer is another interesting topic. Will this new system translate over to it? Or will it be limited like in the first game? I realize I went a bit off topic with this video, but I still think there's so many interesting consequences for an emphasis on melee weapons. Maybe there's even more to it than we've already seen. With the increased verticality in combat, maybe we could do some death from above air assassinations, or pushing down enemies from high places. Who knows? But that's just what I think. What do you think? Do you agree with my points? Disagree? What do you think about The Last of Us Part 2 seemingly having more focus on the melee combat? Tell me in the comments down below and let's discuss it. And until next time, have a great day.